Welcome everyone, welcome. I hope this message finds you well. I figured this was a good opportunity to try to simplify a little bit of the misunderstandings and the terminology that's floating around in the spiritual community. We keep hearing the term the Ascension, but what does it really mean? And so very simply, I'm going to tackle that conversation as clearly as possible, and then I'm going to evolve into a self-help, what you can do to properly, healthily navigate these times. All right, so that's the simple layout for today's discussion. Simplification of the events, and then advice, tips and tricks. And so when you hear the term ascension, sometimes you hear like 3D to 5D, or you hear third density to fourth density. The easiest way to understand it is that the vibration of the planet is moving higher. Okay, so every molecule on the whole planet, every molecule in the universe actually, it vibrates. Everything is in motion. And that includes the cells in your body, for example. As the planet moves to a higher vibrational space, which is the vibration, the molecules themselves are starting to move faster and faster. It's allowing for the consciousness, which is the knowing or the awakened state of the planet, to expand. Okay, so if we think about, there's an old Hindu quote which says that spirit sleeps in the rock, dreams in the animal, and awakens in the human. So this would be a continuation of the progression of the spiritual awakening. And in turn, as the consciousness expands further and further, the capacity for you to understand your mission, understand why you're here, have greater insight and clarity into your human experience, and move into a space of love and compassion and unity with others. All of that will strengthen. Because the next level of consciousness, right, the ascended state of consciousness, allows us to transcend much of the human mind and actively realize that we're all part of a singular. We're all part of a collective. And as your progression gets further and further down that path, you start to realize that everything is connected. The problem is that right now we're on a planet where the vast majority of those who inhabit this planet feel very separate from each other. So much so that they desire to control or to exploit or to otherwise seek to gain advantage at the expense of others. And so that's the other direction that some souls, spiritual beings, are moving in, which is that they're moving down a path of more a self-serving route. And so you can think of it in this context. As the planet moves down this path, you will have a frequency, which is of the we, or the collective consciousness. So the we frequency. And then you'll have a second frequency, which is the dominant frequency currently, which is the me frequency. And so everybody that's here, everybody that you know, is either choosing to be in a conscious state of the we frequency, or usually it's the unconscious state of the me frequency. And you can look around your friends, your family. It's very painful when it's close family members. But if you're on the we frequency and they're on the me frequency, these last few years, you start to feel a rupture. You start to feel a divide. And that is because the earth is now operating with really two levels of consciousness. The old way of doing things, the me frequency, or the new way of moving forward, the we frequency, the path of love and compassion. And I can tell you that people who are on the we frequency their whole lives, but fell into a state of fear, or otherwise were captured in a lot of the drama that unfolded on the planet over the last few years, unfortunately had their vibration lowered. And if they happened to make a decision to take something into their body, for example, that was perhaps deliberately intended to lower their vibration, it's very possible that they ended up shifting onto the me frequency. And in that state, they may have locked themselves into a low vibrational cycle. And so that's the general framework, is that whether people realize it or not, as the planet's consciousness moves higher, there is a great divide happening in the two frequencies that are showing dominance, and everybody is being forced to choose, whether they're aware of it or not, which frequency calls to them. And I assure you that one of these frequencies will become the frequency that moves forward, and the other frequency is leaving. And those who are on the other frequency will find it harder and harder to healthily remain in the body. As the planetary vibration moves higher, there will be a greater disconnect, an inconsistency between the vibration of their physical body and the vibration of the realm in which they've incarnated. And that gap will end up fostering in a discomfort. It's the gentlest way I can put it, which will make it harder and harder to remain in the body. Okay, that's the framework, that's the starting point. Just for intrigue, I'll tell you that the Mayan calendar, you heard a lot about the Mayan calendar years ago. A generation ago is all the talk because the Mayan calendar ended in 2012. And many spiritualists wrongfully believe that that was the end of days. That was going to be the completion of the planet, because why else would the Mayan calendar expire? What the Mayan calendar was pointing to was the end of the third density, which was the completion of that level of consciousness for the planet. And that at around that time, 2012, which is about a decade ago, an in-streaming of energy, which is light consciousness, started to pour into the planet as a function of the source connection for the planet, as well as the sun, so solar events, started to bring in more energy for the planet to start this process of the ascension. Many of those who are awakened, who are starting to see things differently, for example, in government, or perhaps differently through media, or perhaps differently through the pharmaceutical space, they've had their consciousness expanded tremendously over the last 10 years, and specifically over these last few years, as there's been a dramatic acceleration. Okay, so the Mayans didn't have it wrong, for example, they had it right. It was just misunderstood. The death of the planet in 2012 was the death of the old way of being, a planet that was otherwise asleep. And those that are carrying a particularly high vibration within their bodies were the first to awaken as the planet started to move higher. If you are strongly locked into the we frequency, it's starting to affect all areas of your life. So, for example, if you were in a toxic relationship, you couldn't maintain that relationship. If you were in a difficult job that was unfulfilling, or perhaps with a bit of a corrupt or maybe unsavory employer, it would become harder and harder to stay the course in that career. Your friends and your family, the content that you enjoy, whether it be entertainment or media-based, if the vibration for this content or these relationships was of a particularly low nature, and it was moving deeper and deeper onto that we frequency, into that me frequency, and you were on the we frequency, it would have been very hard for you to hold on to it. For those who found themselves in between, where they were holding on to a shitty relationship or holding on to an unfulfilling job because they weren't ready to get off, this past year would have been very difficult for you. In this past 2 years, there would have been more and more suffering because your spiritual self is begging you to move on to a high vibrational path, while your human self is holding on to the familiar and putting you in a state of limbo. I can assure you that there are still a number of people who have yet to fully decide. And all I can advise is the sooner, the better. You want to get on the right frequency for you as quickly as possible. And optimistically, if you're watching this video and you're resonating with this sort of content, you're being pulled onto the we frequency. All right. Incidentally, with regards to the Mayans, the Mayan civilization isn't gone. We believe that this multi-thousand-year civilization just kind of disappeared and they left behind these artifacts and pyramids. They actually ascended on their own previously, which is to say that their civilization raised their vibration enough that they wound up in a different dimension. And so they still exist. They've just left behind a few of their artifacts that make it seem as if they're gone. But we can't interact with them because we're at a different point. We're at a different dimension. And you are a multidimensional being, which means there's a version of you operating many, many different dimensions. And when I speak of your source connection, I'm referring to your highest point by which you connect within the source construct. There's a point of consciousness that's streaming through you. And so as the ascension moves forward and the veil, which is the obstruction that exists within this realm, thins, that source consciousness, that multidimensional component of you, will allow for a greater in-streaming of knowing. It'll become easier for you to align with your mission. It'll become easier for you to realize why you're here. Okay? And that's the name of the game. So if you haven't yet awoken to your mission, which is the reason that you're here, if you're on the we frequency, it's going to become more and more available to you. It'll become easier to know. And keep in mind that we come from a realm without words. And so most of what we're trying to accomplish is the polarization or the infusing of a higher vibration, which would involve things such as love or compassion or courage or self-love. All these incarnations are orchestrated in a hopeful attempt to have us strengthen certain high vibrational intentionality. We just don't realize that when we're in a challenging relationship, that it's because we're supposed to find self-love. Or if we find ourselves otherwise maybe dealing with conflict in our family, it's because we're supposed to move into compassion and understanding. That's the name of the game. Those are the virtues that are spoken of in the Catholic faith. You hear a lot of the mitzvahs in the Jewish faith. You hear the breaking from desire in Eastern philosophy and Buddhism. It all orients around the same thing, moving to a higher vibrational space and aligning with your reason for being. And that reason for being will become far more available. It'll be clearer to each and every one of us as the planet's consciousness moves higher and as we wind up firmer and firmer on the we frequency. So along those lines, what can I say? First and foremost, how do you know if you're on the we frequency? So if you're connecting with this sort of content, or you spend a lot of your time pursuing spiritual discussions, if you find yourself in acceptance for the challenges in your life as opposed to in conflict with them, which is to say that you're still working through them, but you're no longer descending into a low vibrational state of anger and frustration, those are all pretty quick indications that you're moving in the right direction. But more specifically, many people who are on this frequency, for example, they've actually experienced quite a few body aches and pains over the course of the last year or so. And so these are unusual body aches and pains. You don't have any basis for them. There is a purification process that's happening on the planet, and a lot of the ancestral traumas and ancestral pains are actively moving through high vibrational incarnates now. So if you think back over the last however many months, if you had severe back pain or leg or joint issues, and you're not usually accustomed to experiencing them like this, it could be a very good indication that you're purifying lineage, family lineage pain. The second indication that you're likely moving into alignment is you have memories from your past which pop into your head from out of nowhere, and things that you haven't thought about maybe in 10 or 20 years, and they come and then they go. They come and then they go, and you're having all these errant, all these one-off thoughts. An indication of bizarre memories moving through your consciousness is actually your vibration moving higher, and the thoughts that were part of the identification with form are dissolving. And so that's another positive indication. The third indication is you're having trauma release. And so when I speak of trauma release, oftentimes it's a difficult, stressful, or overwhelming experience that the nervous system couldn't handle. And a lot of the times it happens in your sleep, where you'll have a very difficult, like a tense or very aggressive type of dream, and you're reliving some past event. It's also a purification process. Many of you in this space, before going to sleep, actively call for the Creator to release trauma. If your frequency is aligned, it's never been easier to divest of trauma. And so those are three quick indications that you've found yourself on the we, potentially found yourself on the we frequency. right? Some other more simplistic indications would be you're not as materialistic, you're having trouble with a lot of the media and simple entertainment and content, you find your priorities have become more meaningful, you're drawing into spiritual conversations more and more, you feel a desire to meet people who are likewise in a state of consciousness, you're seeing the expansion of the way you think and feel, you're no longer playing the victim and you're detached from people who are. These are all beautiful indications that you have once again started to affirm the we frequency. I can tell you that ultimately this process that we're moving through is a multi-year process. And I believe that the intensity of it, like we've experienced over the last few years, is unfortunately it's just getting going. I think we've got quite a number of years to go. And I think that the next phase is probably, they're in the planning, because there are forces on the planet that are desperately trying to keep us locked into a me frequency. They exist in a hierarchy within the me frequency and they're right at the top. And so they want everybody else to remain on that me frequency to ensure that they remain in power and are dominant and otherwise controlling your being. And so that's part of this conversation. I won't go too much into it, but understand that there are tremendous forces. And those forces are doing everything that they can to keep you otherwise asleep. It's necessary for their survival. And they're aware of it. And they have the confidence into thinking that most of you will stay asleep. Most of you will remain compliant. That they can either scare you, manipulate you, or otherwise control you into doing what they want to do to keep tabs on you at all times and to maintain a dummied down lower vibration for you. Okay? So along those lines, I have a few notes here. So along those lines, a few tips and tricks for navigating these times. First and foremost, get really good at saying no. No, I won't do that. No, that doesn't feel right. No, I don't want to take that into my body. No, I don't care what you say or what you tell me. Something's not vibrating correctly. The strength of no is super important in these times. And along those same lines, the time may present itself where they want you to take something on your body and continue to take other things into your body. If the advice is coming from a place which is of low vibration, even though they say it's for your safety, it's for the community's security, it's necessary for your children because the science says so, but the vibration is coming forth from a group that is otherwise determined to control you and so oftentimes has their own interests at heart. Right? It's so clearly of a low vibrational nature. To be able to say no to taking anything in or on your body is critically important to healthily navigate these times. I will also say that nothing is fixed. Nothing is fixed. And if, on a pre-incarnation basis, you weren't intended to take anything into your body at this time, and yet you did take something into your body and have now grown to regret it, it's okay. You're in a position now of awareness, and you can start to ask for help. So from the heart space, in a quiet moment, call forth and start requesting that any of the effects, vibrational or otherwise, on your physical body, which has violated the sanctity of your being and your connection with the Creator, ask for that tool, that thing that you may have taken into your body, ask for any of the effects to be reversed. All right, come from a place of humility and ask for it to be reversed. If you don't feel that there's anything wrong with anything that you've taken and you continue to take it, that's fine also. But for those who are questioning whether or not they've aligned themselves properly over these last few years and whether they navigated in the best possible way and whether the messaging around the product was consistent and honest and true, if they feel that everything was hunky-dory, this video is not for you. But if you're questioning what you've taken into your body, it's a good time to start asking for its effects to be reversed. And if you have loved ones who are otherwise on the fence and questioning what they've taken into their body, it's also a good time for them to ask for help, to have it reversed, to see if it's possible. At some point an anecdote will come out, I assure you, but that's a number of years away. And the effects of what's unfolding now are only going to accelerate. Some of the early data that's coming out is really quite unfortunate. And it's just the trajectory of the planet right now. All right, so that's the first bit of advice. Don't take anything in or onto your body that is being promoted by the institutions that are claiming to be working in your best interest for your safety, even though it's just a series of deceit and manipulations that keep piling on top of each other. All right, and so that also goes with the ability to say no. Just say no. Say no to drugs. Just say no. The other thing that I would say is that all the activities in your life carry a vibration. And so the food and certainly the media, your friends, your family, your career, everybody has to figure out for themselves how they affirm the we frequency for them. And so you have to look at all these different elements. And if you haven't been feeling well, if you're overtired, or if you're always stressed out, or if you're anxious, or you just feel like your relationships are weakening, start looking at all these different elements and ask that simple question: are they of high vibration? Are they coming from a place of love and understanding and compassion? Is there patience? Right? Is it an energy that I want to hug? Is it something that I want to be with? And if that's not the case, start asking yourself if it's something that you can do without. The more you jettison from your life that is of a low vibration and replace it optimistically with that which is of a high vibration, the easier it will be for you to transition onto the we frequency. I'm telling you from my heart space, I want everybody to join on this we frequency. It's a minority right now. It would be great if we could get more and more people moving into this space. It's building, it's strengthening. People are waking up all the time. And the planet is moving forward with or without us. So that's a decision that's been made. The planet will ascend. The question is how many of us will join in love and conscious of unity, a unity consciousness. That's the definition of the next level of which the planet is moving towards, a collective, whereby we look at the needs of others and it's prioritized over our own needs. And all others are prioritizing our needs over theirs. And it creates a harmonious society. I don't know how much of it we'll see in our lifetime, but I believe that as we move through this transitional point, we'll start to arrive at it more and more. Okay, so first tip, say no, and don't trust institutions that want you to take something in or onto your body, right? Second tip is start to jettison things that are not of high vibration from your life. I get messages from people all the time who managed to get out of a toxic relationship or got out of a really difficult job. They just couldn't do it anymore. They were breaking down. I have a lot of compassion, and I give you a great deal of applause for your courage, right? The way forward is always into your vibrational highest self. Right? The third thing, quite simply, and this is the message that I like to resonate through all of my discussions, is that you have two minds. There is the human mind, and then there is the spiritual self or the higher self. And I was speaking to your source connection earlier, and I was talking about your multidimensional self. The intuition that will guide you through these times is coming through all the time. But you can't receive it if your human mind is too active. The devices in our life and the lifestyle that we have been led into leading have all been designed specifically to hyperactivate this part of your being, your human mind. All right? If you're not sure of what I'm saying, see how long you can sit quietly and not have a thought. Can you get to 10 seconds? Could you get to a minute? How long can you sit in proper stillness? Right? If you're not able to find an opportunity to quiet the mind, then it's going to be much, much harder to affirm your source connection and receive the guidance that you need to properly navigate these times. And so having a spiritual practice, for those of you that are called onto the we frequency, is critically, critically important. Many of you already have a spiritual practice and you're doing very well. Some of you are wondering why it's so hard to quiet the mind, and all the while you've got a million devices and notifications going off all day long. Right? And if you don't have time for 20 minutes a day of meditation, for example, you probably need an hour. Okay, or so goes the expression. All right, so that's the third piece of advice. Most of you would have been spending many years, not just these last few years, but many years before, working on all three of these items. Gaining the courage and inner strength to stand in your truth and find your power and say no to that which doesn't feel right. Okay, that's the first bit of advice. The sooner we all take back our power, the sooner this will all be over. The second bit of advice is seek the highest vibrational life that you possibly can. People have been doing this for an awfully long time and doing it successfully. It would have just been an accelerated basis over the last few years. And then the third is introduce a spiritual practice so you can finally push aside the human mind. I can tell you 9 times out of 10 it's working against you. Let it go. And allow your spiritual self to get stronger and stronger. The beauty of the veil thinning right now is that it's opening up a brilliant opportunity for the we consciousness to get stronger and your multidimensional self to start telling you exactly what you need to know to navigate each and every day of your life properly, to arrive healthily at the next level of consciousness for the planet. Okay? I'll just finish off by saying this whole process will go through waves. And so we went through a wave. It was just over 2 years. Actually, in the Far East, they're still going through a wave. And of course, the war that's underway is a different wave for those people there. But overall, for the planet, it'll go through waves of distress. There'll be small waves within bigger waves. And so for those of you that experienced lockdowns or otherwise told that it wasn't safe to leave your home or couldn't send your kids to school or had to put something on your face if you wanted to go to the park, for those of you that went through severe restrictions on your life, you felt the heaviness of these last couple of years, and of course all the fear that was being promoted. That was an example of an intense wave, and it actually did cost quite a few lives in different ways. We're in a bit of a reprieve right now, especially in Europe and the US. This reprieve will be shattered, and not too long, actually, the financial markets are already starting to indicate a lot of the early disruptions that are forthcoming. And I believe that the next wave is probably within the next few months, maybe sometime in the autumn. And then the next wave will carry on for a few years, and then we'll get a reprieve, and then we'll get another wave. And that will probably continue for most of the decade in different ways. But each subsequent wave will be weaker than the one before. I don't know that we've peaked just yet, but we're reaching a peaking point. And then we're going to start to see communities start to form. We're going to start to see the consciousness of those that are ascending, that are on this we frequency, starting to find each other. There's going to be all sorts of different adjustments and developments that happen. But for right now, the advice quite simply is, as I've said, stand in your truth and find your power, the strength to say no. Right? Monitor the vibration of all the things that you're doing and saying and things that you're accepting into your space, and let the things go, or even the people and loved ones, as difficult as that is sometimes. Let those go that are otherwise not vibrating at a high frequency, that are not on the same vibration as you. And then finally, find some stillness. Quiet the mind. Read The Power of Now if you had to, or any other spiritual teaching which consistently comes back to this central theme, which is moving beyond the limitation of the human mind and arriving in a place of knowing as intended by your higher self, your multidimensional self, the source connection, whatever it is that you want to term it. All right? There are beautiful days forthcoming. And right now we're in a nice break for a lot of people that can really catch their breath and enjoy it without dropping their guard. Many of you are being called into preparation for what's to come, and that's beautiful. All right? And so until our next video, I will wish you much love and much light, and look forward to speaking again real soon.